Joining us now is former GOP national spokeswoman Elizabeth Pipko. Elizabeth, thank you for joining us on Power Hour. Donald Trump has answered more than 1,000 questions in his first month of his second term. Joe Biden took 141. And just to put that in perspective, Donald Trump took his 164th question by the end of his third day. Now, we know Trump's entertaining, he's certainly direct, and we're seeing him snap right back at reporters. Here he is shutting down a reporter that suggested people might be worried that Trump may be targeting them.
What do you say to people who worry that targeting an individual firm or individuals who aren't Jack Smith for his actions?
I've been targeted for 4 years, longer than that. So you don't tell me about targeting. I was the target of corrupt politicians for 4 years, and then 4 years after that. So don't talk to me about targeting.
He's not wrong. If anyone knows what it's like to be targeted, it is Donald Trump. Now, this was after Trump revoked security clearances for former special counsel Jack Smith's attorney and other lawyers at his firm who brought 2 criminal cases against Donald Trump that were dropped after he won last November's election. So, Elizabeth, I like to see the transparency, a president that is taking 1,000 questions a month. But will this transparency help him politically in the long run?
There's a lot to work with there. First of all, I just want to mention that he's 100% right about being targeted. I think if anyone knows what that's like, it's certainly President Trump. But I actually speak as someone who was also targeted, right? Me, my own family were also targeted just for being associated with Donald Trump. So I can only imagine what he went through. I know from being kind of an observer on the front line, seeing what him and his family went through. But he was, in fact, targeted because people were so afraid of what could happen if he got back into the White House. Now, when it comes to transparency, look, I have supported President Trump. I've worked for President Trump for nearly 8 years now. I remember in 2016, I was 20 years old, right? I did not have any history in politics. I didn't know who I supported, who I didn't. All I knew was that Donald Trump was different, right? He had no interest in being a politician. He wanted to answer questions. He showed up to interviews and actually answered questions no matter where they came from. And by the way, unlike other politicians and other celebrities, without hearing those questions before he arrived. That is what makes Donald Trump different. He's always been the most transparent candidate, certainly the most transparent candidate of my lifetime. That's why I appreciate him as much as I do. And that's why I'm so grateful for him, because I think he set a precedent for what will happen after he's out of office and what the American people can expect from those on both the right and the left. I can only imagine it's going to come with some controversy in the media, but with that, a lot of benefit with the support of the American people who are desperate for this kind of transparency, especially after the polar opposite of that, actually a president in hiding that we saw for the last 4 years of Joe Biden's presidency.
Oh, absolutely. And isn't it refreshing to have someone, a leader who says what he thinks, who's unpredictable, and it's just the complete opposite of those scripted, rehearsed lines that are, telling you absolutely nothing. But Donald Trump is getting straight to work. Trump and Pete Hegseth have announced an investigation into Joe Biden's disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal.
Have all the generals or command staff that were involved with the withdrawal been fired or relieved of duty?
Well, that's a great idea. I'm not going to tell this man what to do, but I will say that if I had his place, I'd fire every single one of them. That's a very good question.
Well, it's a question we've thought a lot about. We're doing a complete review of every single aspect of what happened with the botched withdrawal of Afghanistan, and plan to have full accountability. It's one of the first things we announced at the Defense Department for that reason. So we're taking a very different view, obviously, than the previous administration, and there will be full accountability.
We need those answers. We needed them years ago, and the suggestion is that mass firings will take place for people who are involved. What can we expect?
Well, look, it's interesting that this is controversial, right? After what happened in Afghanistan, you would have assumed that people on the left and the right would have supported an investigation and certainly the firing of those that were responsible, right? When you lose American service members, when you lose them in this way, you should have to be investigated. You should have to pay for that. The fact is, Joe Biden and his administration had no interest in looking into this disastrous withdrawal because that would have done poorly for him when it came to his political future. He was running a campaign and he was more focused on trying to beat Donald Trump in the next election than being the president the day that he was there, the day that these service members unfortunately passed away. So I think it's very, very sad to know that this is what happened. And I think it's unfortunate we're at a time where things are so politicized that this is controversial. Every American would agree this should be investigated. And every American would agree, I think, that when something like this happens, those that are responsible have to come out, tell us what happened, and walk away from the job because they failed not only these 13 service members, but the American people in the eyes of the world. So obviously this should not be controversial. Obviously this should be investigated. And it is shameful that it wasn't under Joe Biden's administration because, again, he was focused on winning. He did not want poor headlines. He didn't want anyone to even remember this botched withdrawal, which is why he and his administration did not mark the anniversary. It was more about political points, not about serving the people.
Elizabeth, I want to get your thoughts on the Epstein files. A whistleblower has claimed that FBI personnel are destroying evidence on servers, which is believed to include files related to Jeffrey Epstein. Now, this comes as a new task force has been formed led by Anna Paulina Luna, which is focused on declassifying federal secrets, which includes the JFK files, also those involved with the Jeffrey Epstein case. Now, Anna Paulina Luna has taken to X asking for the status on the Epstein files. She's even tagged Pam Bondi because the pressure is really ramping up. We've been hearing that we are going to get these files, we're going to see the client list, and it hasn't happened yet. Why are we still waiting?
Well, look, I will not speak, obviously, for Pam Bondi. I'm sure there's a reason, but it is interesting how curious people are about these files, why they're obviously curious, and why, again, it is controversial that the American people would want these answers. By the way, we talked about Donald Trump being targeted the way that he was. It's because people out there knew that if he were to go back into the White House as president, this is what we could expect. Full transparency, even on the things that can get some of our former politicians in quite a bit of trouble. This is why so many people are looking forward to these documents coming out. I know Pam Bondi has mentioned several times she's looking into this. I'm sure things have to be done correctly, but in due time, we'll get the answers that I believe the American people deserve.